Well, it's time to leave Herriard now. You can just see the station in the distance, and now we're going to start moving towards Lasham. But what you can see, I'm stood on the track bed, so nice and level, but directly as we move out you can see it rises, which is clearly infill over the years. Now we've got the original embankment here. Up there, if you remember, was the water tower which you saw in the last episode. So we're going to walk up this hill, and we've still got the original embankment. You can see it there on our left. I don't think there's any fence posts or anything to see, but as we come up on top of this ridge we come to a field. It's a bit gooky, it rained quite heavily this morning, so we're coming out onto quite an open area now. And as you can see, we've got a field in front of us, and unfortunately any trace of the railway there has been obliterated. But I'll mark out exactly where it went. We'll just get up to this bit here. So although we're on an elevated area above where the track bed was, we're pretty much in the same area. And if you look at the tree in front of us, there's a gap, and the line went more or less through there, so across this field and through that gap area, and made its way towards Lasham. Okay, so we've walked along the A339 for a bit, and we've managed to pick up the track bed again. That way comes from Herriard. The A339 is down this track here, and it's just down in the dip, and maybe through the trees you can see some airliners, aircraft. Yes, I said aircraft. And that is the servicing depot or the airport at Lasham, and I can see about 4 or 5 at the moment. Anyway, back to the subject in hand. So our track bed comes from Herriard that way, and this way we're now moving towards Lasham, and unfortunately we've got quite a gloop in front of us, but we're going to give it a go. So best foot forward. Yeah, it's pretty claggy. Now potentially we've got a chance, like we have in the other areas, of finding some remnants, the classic fence posts, etc. So we'll keep an eye out, but at the moment all I can see is mud. So we've carried along the track bed moving towards Lasham. We've got a bit of an anomaly here, because as you can see the land drops considerably by a good 20 feet I'd say, which means it's either been engineered considerably over the years or I'm in the wrong place. Well, I've got to the bottom of the slope now, and I'm a little bit confused as to which is the actual railway level, because we've got a clear cutting edge here, or an embankment I should say, which looks very original. Over the other side we've got nothing, just trees, quite old trees as well. So is the level I'm standing on now the actual railway track bed, or is the level up there? I'm thinking down here because we've got the cutting. But let's move on and see what we can find. So we've got our cutting continues over on the left hand side there, and it looks like we're coming to the end of our walk, or this part anyway. Oh, look at this, there's these squelches. Now we've got brickwork here, and it looks like a culvert of some description, and it also looks very old. In fact, put a bit of light on that. You can see that's very old moss covered bricks there. Now is that part of, is that to drain water away from the railway? If it is, then it would definitely guarantee that this is the track bed level. And in fact we've got, is that another piece of rail there? Yep, there's another piece of narrow gauge rail there. So I'd say that this level we're on now is the track bed, and the higher level up there is all infill since it closed.
It's got to be, hasn't it?
I'd say so.
The culvert would be buried, would it? So it's got to be the level.
That's old brickwork.
Yeah,
What's on the other side? It's a little deceiving because there isn't an embankment on the other side. But that's a nice find. Anyway, let's move up here. And we've got like a little stairway, and in fact, I've noticed on there, obviously this isn't in position from years back, but we've got more narrow gauge rail used as posts. So you've got 1, 2, 3 up there, obviously been reused. So let's get back in the clag. So the higher level up here isn't the railway track bed. I'm standing on it here, and we've got a cutting edge or embankment. It's not really a cutting because there's no embankment on the other side, and that's still sitting there. Although maybe that this embankment here, no, I'm thinking too deeply. Anyway, we're coming to the end of this particular section, and I can't see anything else. We've got a post over there, but I don't think that's anything. It looks wood, and if it's wood, it's probably too old. But what we do have is one of these iron fence posts. They're so impressive, considering they're just designed to hold wire. And what we also have next to it is yet another piece of narrow gauge rail, obviously been dug up, and there's another piece lying on the floor next to it. So as we're back on higher ground again, so we've come down the slope, hit the actual track bed, in my opinion, come back up high again in an artificial levitation of ground. The tree line depicts the track bed and the route. So as it goes off towards Lasham, it's going to loop round to the left, and it's going to eventually join up with the A339. Okay, let's not dismiss the last bit, but it does definitely need some clarification. The question I asked was what level the track bed sat at. Well, the answer is definitely up at the top. And I'll turn once more to the film footage to explain. On the left of the picture, you can clearly see a raised embankment. This is the track bed, which I completely disregarded and fell into the trap of assuming that the modern path must be that of our old track bed. And to clarify things further, I'll turn once again to the map. So this is our modern overhead view with the 1961 map overlay over the top. And it shows the route through New Inn Brow quite clearly. So this is where we started on the crossroads. And we walked down here. This is where it was very claggy. And we squelched our way down here, which is exactly the right route of the track bed, until we got to here. And this was the top of the incline down into the dip. Now, if you look at the embankment, which is clearly marked on this map, you can see that the track bed clearly goes through this undergrowth here, and that is the top of our embankment, which I completely disregarded. I came down here instead in this dip, and it was here I asked the question, where was the railway? Up here or down here? Well, the answer, as I've already proved, is quite clearly up the top. However, had I not gone down into the dip, I would never have found the wonderful little culvert, which was a great little find. And it just also just goes to prove that when you're doing this exploring, just because you think you're in the right place, later research will often prove that you're not. On the afternoon of Sunday the 19th of August 1928, a Foden steam lorry making its way down here, Lasham Hill, proceeded towards the main Basingstoke to Alton road, which in those days crossed just in front of me and not where the current A339 is today. Passing over, it slowly continued, climbing slightly to anticipate the Basingstoke to Alton railway, which lay ahead. At exactly this position in front of me lay an occupation crossing, consisting of wooden fencing and large concrete posts which supported the crossing gates. Passing over the crossing, the lorry ambled, but bearing down upon it over the 1 in 50 decline were a rake of 6 coaches and locomotive belonging to the United Coast Lines Railway Company. Moments later, the train collided with the lorry, instantly destroying it, while the locomotive derailed before coming to a rest on its side. Amongst the tumult of dust, flying stones, soil and escaping steam, the carriages flung around also derailed before catching fire. This, however, was no accident. This was a deliberate act of sabotage with expressed intention of causing the utmost devastation and carnage. As awful as this was, there wasn't a single casualty other than the rolling stock, which was utterly destroyed, for the dramatic crash scene, which was later described as the most spectacular train crash in history, was a scene from the 1929 Gainsborough Pictures movie The Wrecker, the story of which is a criminal deliberately orchestrating railway accidents in order to frighten people from travelling by rail and move them onto buses instead. Miraculously, removal of all of the wreckage was completed by 10 o'clock the next morning, and repairs effected so quickly that the 15:25 train from Basingstoke ran that afternoon to Alton. The fact that the wrecker crash actually took place has never been in doubt. We have documentary evidence and film footage, but there has been conjecture as to the name of the crossing where it happened and just where the location sits on today's landscape. Popular belief is that the crash took place on Salter's Hatch Crossing and that the exact location is now hidden beneath the tarmac of the A339. As with many anomalies, I think the easiest way to solve this is by looking at maps. So, courtesy of the National Library of Scotland, let's try to do just that. So here you can see an overhead view of the area in question. Here is Lasham Hill, where our Foden steam lorry came down. This here is the current A339. And this is the site of the crash. Now if I overlay the 1910 map, we get a clearer picture of the differences. You can see Lasham Hill hasn't changed. The road alignment clearly has, and you can see that it runs slightly south of today's road, and instead of curving south it continues straight for a few yards. And then of course you can also clearly see the railway's route. Now sources say that the crash site is now under where the A339 runs today. Well, the lorry came down Lasham Hill, that is undisputed. To continue to the railway crossing, the 1910 map shows clearly that to reach it, it would have to pass over the road first, thus proving that the crash site is definitely not where today's A339 lay. And if I fully expose the 1910 map, it gives a clearer picture of the topography at the time. And if I turn to this map by Open Data Maps, it shows the correct site of the wrecker crash, which corresponds exactly to where I place it. But what of Salter's Hatch Crossing? If we return to the 1910 map and move just a few yards west along the railway, we come to a level crossing over the main road. This is Salter's Hatch, and it's here that any confusion probably arose, with an original account
more than likely stating that the crash site took place at Salter's Hatch, the site of which is indeed buried beneath the tarmac of the A339. And on a final note regarding the wrecker location, have a look at this still from the movie. The train is in the foreground with the crash site at the area where smoke can be seen to the right of the photo. In the background can be seen the Basingstoke to Alton road with the rise of Salter Hatch crossing clearly visible as the line curves tightly to the left.
Well, I've heard from some reports that people have found wreckage in here. I don't expect to find anything, but you never know. Let's have a quick look in the bushes to see what we can see. We've got various bits of rotting wood, but that's far too new to see. What I'm obviously expecting to find is a rusting piece of train, but that's probably clearly not going to happen, and I can't really see anything but branches and greenery. Let's have a look in this bit here. Oh no, what have we got here? Now we've got two large ivory cover. Can you see them? There's one there and there's one there. I wonder what they could be. Let's see if I can get in the bushes and not get caught by brambles. See if I can get in here. Ow! Right, I'm in. There we go. It's concrete. Look, there's a bracket on there. I wonder, could that be the concrete fence posts that were on the level crossing holding the gates? It's highly possible. And there's two of them. Obviously there'd probably have to be four, but look at that, that's a sturdy iron bracket on there. Let's have a look at the original photos and see.
This is the best photo to see the crossing gates, and it's not definitive and it's also not very clear, but I think I'm going to stick my neck out, maybe a little hopefully, and say that the two large posts that I found in the trees could well be those visible in this photo.
I'm standing on the former route of the Basingstoke to Alton road as it was prior to rerouting in World War II. Today the A339 is here to my right, as you can see, while the site of the wrecker is back there by those trees on the other side of the chevron. Our line would have continued through the crash site, through the field here where there's a slight embankment that's just about visible, and curved towards the current road until at this point here, more or less where this chevron is, where the track bed is now lost under the A339, which traverses the same route for a few hundred yards. And it was here where Salter's Hatch level crossing would have been located. Now bear in mind that the road in those days was straight and it carried on towards those trees where the sign is and where that van's just coming out, and that's today's Spain Lane, whilst today's line would have curved away on the same alignment as today's road. So it may look like I'm stood in the middle of the field, and in fact I am stood in the middle of a field. I'm just outside the site of Bentworth and Lasham station, and believe it or not, I am actually more or less on the track bed. And where I'm standing in this field, if you look just where I'm pointing, there is a slight dip in the field, and that indicates where the line would have come through here. And they're heading that way. Just behind the trees we've got Lasham station, Bentworth and Lasham station, and we've got the station cottages there. But to my left we've got the remains of something a little bit special. Now this used to be a wind pump.
This photo from the Basingstoke and Alton Railway book by Barton Publishing shows the wind-powered water pump at Cliddeston, which was very similar to this one here at Bentworth and Lasham.
And we've got the remains of it here. We've got some nice brickwork that remains, red brick, and there's quite a bit of ironwork still around. You've got this large iron plate. I'm assuming, because we're in the middle of a farmer's field who's kindly given us permission to be in here, I'm assuming that this is all original stuff from when this was a wind pump. But imagine you got the brick base, then you got a tower, a tank above that, and then you got a windmill. We've got a large piece of concrete here, and we've got bits like this, pieces of iron. And there's another large piece of iron there. We've got these bolts sticking out here, and then here we've got the other side of the base, the brick base. It's a great relic, it's a fantastic relic. And then down here we've got some more ironwork. What was these for? Were they parts of the old tank? That's got a thread on it, and you've got bolts sticking out. You've got one there and one there. And then you've got the brickwork again. Fantastic find. We're moving this way now. We're going to head toward those trees. We're moving back onto the track bed. So where we got these trees here, you can see the station cottages there. You see some vehicles in the trees there. To the right of those is the remains of Bentworth and Lasham station. So these trees ahead of us, obviously they weren't there, neither was the fence. But we got the station platform. It's just inside there behind those bottles. And we've actually been allowed access to that site, so we're going to look in there in a minute. But before we do, I want to show you something just this side of the fence. Now obviously this would have been the station site. We've got a modern day fence here. But if we move up here just a little bit more, and here it is, we've got another one of these really ornate iron fence posts. And there we go, we've got a couple of pieces of narrow gauge rail also. How many of those have we found now? So I've reached Bentworth and Lasham station now. Our track bed would have come through here, through these trees, through this piled up earth. And if we turn the camera around, we have our station right here. And as you can see, it's identical to all of the other stations. We've got the concrete platform edge here. And I have to say a massive thank you to the very kind gentleman who allowed us access. Thank you very much, Brian. As you can see there, we've got undamaged part of the platform here. Unfortunately, it has been damaged not too recently. As you can see there, the edges have been taken off.
And that area to the rear of the platform where you can see the cars, that would have been the site for the station sidings. When the passenger service ceased in 1932, trains still reached Bentworth and Lasham as a weekday freight service would depart Basingstoke at 1:30 in the afternoon. In 1933, the onward track to Alton was severed, with a set of buffers being placed on the station side of Bentworth and Lasham crossing. This goods service finally ceased, with the last train running on the 31st of May 1936, with the track being lifted as far as Thornycroft Works in Basingstoke the next year.
Well, I've managed to get up on the platform. That way's coming from Herriard, so we're looking down on the track bed. You can see the platform there. You can also see the platform edge there. Unfortunately, it's quite damaged, but nevertheless it is still here and it's absolutely brilliant. And once again, thank you, Brian, it's very kind of you to let us in. But you can see the way the platform used to curve, as you see in the old pictures. Line going off towards Alton there, and the crossing gates of where they used to be just in front. Now this end of the station, this is going towards Alton. It's quite buried here. We've got a bit of the platform there. And we've got a lot of infill. We've got to remember this is a former industrial site, so there's quite a bit of debris that's been left. Now if we go through these brambles here, try not to get hacked to pieces by the thorns. So we've got the end of the platform here. You can see the slope just there, and if I turn the camera now back looking towards Herriard again, it's pretty overgrown even in February, but you get a clear indication of our station. And then the line would have come through here, out beyond those gates onto the road, and then you'd have had a level crossing that side.